Hello and welcome to this week's fretboard session. Today we're going to take a look at how you can move your intermediate guitar playing and soloing to the next level with phrasing. We're going to learn about what phrasing is. We're going to learn about what you can do to start practicing it and improving your soloing on the guitar. So for this stuff, we're at an expected level where you've got some scales that you can play, but you're unhappy with how they sound. So you might have the minor pentatonic under your fingers, you might have some full scales, but let's say we have the minor pentatonic. You might have just that one box, or you might have a whole bunch of boxes that you're able to play on the guitar. But what we need to do from there is once we start knowing the scales, we need to start actually learning to make them sound good. Now, the first thing that people do with that, and tip number one, is to noodle with them. To be able to just, any scale you've got, you need to be able to noodle with it. You want to practice that scale over a backing track. That's probably not something revolutionary for you to hear at this point, but if you've just been learning the shapes, don't just stick with those shapes. You need to get a backing track on. That's my favorite thing about YouTube. There are millions of people who have made backing tracks and they sound fantastic. Just put in your style of music that you like listening to, and then the key you want to play in a backing track, and you've got endless amounts of great material to listen to. I don't think I will ever make a backing track because there are so many great ones on YouTube already that I've got no need to at all. So once we start getting used to the scale shape, and this is our pre-setup for working on phrasing, once we're used to what we're playing and we're used to what those scales are, and even if it's just position one, then we need to start expanding our ability to play phrases and to make those things that we're playing sound good. Now for that, I need to explain that there are two separate halves to phrasing that often get talked about. So you have, on the one side, we have phrase creation. So this is phrasing lines. So when you think about a singer, and I always think this relates back to singing, and what we're doing with soloing is we're trying to recreate as best as possible all the cool things that the human voice can do. That's often what we're aiming for on the guitar, is we're trying to get, it sound as good as a singer, like that kind of top line melody. That would be awesome. So if you think about a singer, they have the phrase they sing, which might be ba 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 ba. Okay, and that's to do with the note choice and the rhythm. So one thing that you can do is you need to improve working on your note choice and what your phrase says. And it's like a short musical sentence is a phrase. And the rhythm, the choice of that rhythm makes a huge difference to how it sounds. So we could go ba-ba-da-ba-da. But if I took those same notes and went ba-ba, ba-ba, ba, it's a different phrase. It feels different. It has the same notes, but we've moved the rhythm around. I shortened some of the notes. They were quite staccato. What if we made it all long? Ba, 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 ba. That was a different speed, but we had longer notes. And every tiny change you make has a difference in how your phrase sounds. So one important thing to work on is phrase creation, the writing and coming up of phrases. We'll talk about a tip for that now. So what you do that is you sing just like I did along to backing tracks. It's all about what happens in your head. If you can sing and come up with ideas in your head, then we're going to try and deepen those on the guitar, and we try and get it so you can play what you sung on the guitar. But the most important thing for phrase creation to improve is what's going on up here, because you can't ever go above in your guitar playing what you can imagine being able to play or imagine being sung over a track. Like this, it's just not going to happen. You can learn someone else's licks and you can kind of parrot stuff, but in terms of what you have to say, that has to be expanded by playing and by experimenting. And I see a lot of students when they start doing this stifle themselves. And if you think like a child, like if you took a 2-year-old and you saw their ability for art or any kind of singing and you went, oh, that's no good, stop doing that, you would kill that creativity for the rest of time. And so when I work with students and we're doing this phrase creation part of it, it can often be quite embarrassing because you haven't come in for singing lessons, you've come in for guitar lessons, but you have to really nurture that part of you to grow. Otherwise, there comes a point where your guitar playing will cap out and you just can't go above. Now, I'm not saying that your ability is going to be that of a 2-year-old. And if it was, that would be fine, but it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that there's going to be a point where it caps out, and we have to continually work on what's going on in your imagination, your ability to sing over tracks and come up with lines that you like the sound of or you like the idea of. Doesn't have to be great singing, but you got to nurture that kind of inner artist within you to come up with those ideas. So once we start getting those ideas down and we start building a flow of having ideas come out of your voice and your mouth, then you want to start actually playing those on the guitar. So you want to be able to sing a rhythmic idea and then play that back on the guitar. Now, at this point, I'm not so concerned with the actual notes you're playing, but I want to know that you can sing a rhythm and then play a rhythm. And we've done the work in the front end to make sure that you're sure about you like the rhythms, and we're building up the rhythms you have. And now we're going to try and put those on the guitar. So what does that sound like? Well, if I sing ba-ba-da-da-da as an idea of a backing track, it wasn't the same notes, but it was that same rhythm. And then I can take that idea, it's called a motif, all over my scale and play it in different areas and see what I can come up with. So I can do notes that are next to each other. I could do wide expanses of notes with big jumps and see how they sound. And you start taking your scale, and now you have a deliberate goal to practice, which is the rhythm that you came up with, and you're going to try and do it, whether that's without the backing track or over a backing track is fine too, but you have a deliberate outcome here. You have something from your brain, a rhythm that you came up with, and then you're trying to improvise, and it's doing a whole bunch of really good stuff. We're getting to practice the scale, we're getting to get our fingers used to moving on these different areas, and we're getting to connect something that you came up with as a rhythm in your head to the guitar. So each day when you come back to your practice, you make up a new rhythm and then you try and apply it to the scales that you're on. So here's another example. I come back on day 2 and I go ba ba da da da. Okay, cool. Now I can move that around. Okay, and you get used to your scale moving in all sorts of different ways, but they all relate back to interesting rhythms that you like the sound of, that you've been practicing without using the guitar. And this improves your ability to play solo so much because you're connecting your fingers to things that you actually want to hear on your instrument rather than just random things as we go through. So everything we've talked about so far only deals with phrase creation, and that's only one part of phrasing. So our phrase creation, just as a reminder, was the structure of the phrase that we're making, that musical sentence, and it was the rhythm of how that comes out. So think of it like the words on the page and then the rhythm of how that's said. Now, when we have music and when we have singing, there's another aspect to this that comes up too, which really influences, especially on the guitar, how it comes out and how it sounds. And this is the thing called phrasing elements. This is to do with especially our important notes, how they sound and how we move between them. So some examples of phrasing elements are vibrato, ma, okay? So we could have put this as part of our phrase creation, but it's a minutiae that needs practicing all on its own. Things like vibrato take a lot of refining to get them to sound really good, and so it's nice to separate the two. I have heard people who have fantastic phrasing elements because they've practiced lots and lots of vibrato, but cannot write a phrase to save their lives. And I've heard people who write great musical phrases, but cannot put phrasing elements on those to save their lives. And so you have to work on the two separately. And so I'll give you some examples of how you can work on phrasing elements. Now, just to recap, what are phrasing elements that we can use? And the most common ones that we come up with on the guitar are vibrato. And then we have especially things between notes. We have bends, we have slides, we have hammer-ons and pull-offs, and these are all different ways of us expressing our voice on the instrument. And so as you go through on the instrument, you want to make sure that you're practicing each of these individually so that you get good enough technique that when it comes to saying your phrases, you can now practice them in the phrases as well. So I'm going to give you some examples of how you can practice your phrasing elements right away, and then we're going to look at how you can put the two together and we can start making phrases that actually sound complete with phrasing elements and phrase creation both together. So let's take a look at that now. So when we're practicing our scales, we can practice our phrasing elements at the same time as we go through them. And this is going to help us build the technique we need, because by the time we want to be creative, we want to have the technique already there. So here's an example. If I'm working through my minor pentatonic, I can go through minor pentatonic once I know it, and I can try and practice putting vibrato on every note. Now, vibrato is a fantastic and very interesting phrasing element, and actually we can zoom in even more than just working on this in scales. Vibrato is probably the most important thing to work on in terms of your phrasing elements, because it's the most underrated, it's the most under-practiced thing for guitar players, who often they go, I've got to the note, I've got some vibrato on, no one will notice. And the reality is vibrato done well can be the kind of thing that makes people feel the emotion in a note and in a song, and done badly or not thought about and not considered really shows a whole different level of playing, and it doesn't make you sound like a pro. So if you want to sound like a professional musician and you want to have people have a reaction to your music that sounds really good, having great intention about your vibrato is really important. Now, the intention is what matters here, and I'll show you how to work through that intention, but it's about deciding what kind of vibrato you want to sound like and then trying to replicate it. Now, you're not going to be able to do that immediately when you start working on vibrato, but I'm telling you that's the long-term goal here, is when you're working on vibrato and the kind of exercises that I'm going to show you now, is you're also going to try and make up your opinion about what kind of vibrato you like as a musician to listen to other guitar players, as you listen to other singers. Start listening for what they're doing with their vibrato. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's completely in tune with the notes that are happening, sometimes it's not. But as you work through the technical exercise of getting good at vibrato, it's important that you understand that you're going to use this to make musical decisions later on with your guitar playing. And the technique in the beginning is just to lay the foundations for us. So how can we work on the minutiae of vibrato and getting it to sound good? Well, the important thing here is that we need to be able to control exactly what we want from that vibrato. So I think of vibrato like small bends, and you want to pick a note to aim for. So if I take this one here and I aim for that note, and then I get my hand in position, and we're using kind of the web part of our hand on the back here, thumbs over the top, thumb nice and close to the note, and then we're turning the door handle, like here, turning that door handle, and we're going so slowly that we can hear exactly the note we're hitting. And you'll find that going slowly builds the calluses and it helps all sorts of stuff. And then we can go, okay, well, I'm going to try and aim for 2 frets up. And I'm going to make sure I hit it every time. Okay, so exercises like that, and you can do it throughout the whole scale. You've also got to learn to do it on different fingers. This is the hardest one. You can see my hands tensing up more as I do that. I need more practice on that one too. Now, working on vibrato at that kind of level of minutiae is really important because it helps you to feel the technique, to know exactly what good vibrato is. And importantly, we were working on one note there because I want you to hear whether the note's going in or not on your guitar playing. So you work at the level that your ear can work to. It's that same thing again. You're never going to go past what your ear can hear with vibrato, and you're never going to go past what your calluses can handle too. So working on vibrato for small amounts of time each day, like 5 minutes, it's going to help build up those calluses. And also it's going to help settle your technique in so you can make some choices artistically later on. I cannot reiterate enough, if you want to sound really good at playing solos on the guitar, taking the time to look at your phrasing elements and how they sound is going to make a massive difference, because you can make ending notes of phrases suddenly so much more expressive. It is the expression to the words of the phrase. If I took the words I had to say right now and what I'm saying to you at the moment, and I just said them with a rhythm and they were monotone, that would be like phrases of phrase creation. Once we start putting all of these extra things, the vibrato and the hammer-ons and the pull-offs in there, suddenly we start having expression, we start having meaning, and things start taking off, and you can really reach people with your guitar playing. So what do we do to put it all back together at the end? Well, we take phrases that we've made, or you can take a phrase from another guitar player that you're practicing, but we're going to play with it. And we can take our phrasing elements that we've been working on, and we're going to rework the original phrase using these different phrasing elements to get us comfortable putting them in anywhere of the lines that we need to. So imagine we've got a phrase and you like the sound of that phrase, and the last note of that phrase, we're going to focus on trying to make that note sound as good as we possibly can. We're going to make some changes each time we go through. We're going to try and put vibrato on it, and we'll practice that until we get that to sound as good as we can. When our fingers start burning out, we're going to switch and we're going to try and put a hammer-on into that note, or a hammer-on technique that we like the sound of to try and make that note sound as good as possible. Then we'll practice the same phrase and we're going to put slides into that note. So there's two benefits here. We're getting to really practice a phrase, but we're getting to now use our phrasing elements in context. And there's a lot of malleability about how the phrasing elements sound and how good they come across in your playing. So if you found today's video useful, please hit the like and subscribe button. I would love you to join me for some more videos. I make them every single week, and I will see you next time.